The night my grandfather slipped into a coma, the silence in our home felt heavier than any funeral procession I had ever seen. I was sitting by the window, watching the rain batter the corrugated roof sheets, when my mother walked in with swollen eyes. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The hospital had called earlier. Grandfather was in the ICU. His lungs had failed him, his frail body depending on machines that beeped like impatient clocks. Grandfather was more than family, he was the backbone of our clan. A man who had worked the dusty cocoa fields of Ghana for half a century, turning sweat into wealth. Unlike many elders who hoarded riches for themselves, he had built schools, funded scholarships, and even opened a clinic in our small town. Everyone respected him, but no one respected him more than me. He raised me. My parents, ambitious but reckless, had left me in his care when I was only 8. He taught me to till soil, to pray at dawn, and most importantly, to never let greed devour my soul. I remembered how he used to say in his husky voice, "Wealth without wisdom is like a knife in the hand of a madman. It cuts everyone, even the one holding it." Now, as machines kept him alive in that sterile hospital ward, my parents were behaving in ways that made my skin crawl. By the third day of grandfather's coma, I noticed strange movements around the house. My father's phone rang non-stop. Men in polished suits came in and out, always speaking in hushed tones. At night, my mother would sit with her calculator, typing figures with trembling fingers. I overheard them once at the dining table. "Do you know how much is sitting in his account?" Father whispered. "Almost $1 million, Mother answered, her voice shaking with equal parts fear and desire. "That money is rotting there while he may never wake up. If we wait, those greedy cousins will swoop in and fight for their share. We need to act now." My stomach twisted. They were plotting to drain grandfather's life savings while he lay dying. I should have confronted them immediately, but I didn't. Fear glued me to silence. I was just 21, still finding my place in a family where power belonged to those who controlled money. 2 weeks later, the looting began. Bank alerts buzzed on their phones at odd hours. Boxes of new electronics appeared in the living room. My father bought a brand new SUV, gleaming black with tinted windows. Mother filled her wardrobe with imported lace and gold jewelry. They told the neighbors that God had finally answered their prayers, but I knew it wasn't God, it was grandfather's blood-stained fortune being siphoned out of his veins. I couldn't stand it. Each night, I visited grandfather in the ICU, whispering to his unconscious body what was happening. Machines beeped in rhythm, his chest rose and fell shallowly, and I prayed he would hear me. "Baba," I whispered, clutching his cold hand, "they are taking everything you worked for. Please, wake up. Please." But his eyelids never fluttered, and the silence remained. The turning point came one humid Saturday night. A storm was raging, the kind where lightning streaked like daggers across the sky. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling absent-mindedly on my phone, when I heard my parents laughing in the study. Curiosity pulled me toward the door. Through the crack, I saw them sitting before piles of cash, bundles of $100 bills stacked like bricks. $990,000, Father declared proudly, slapping his palm on the table. "Every cent. We've cleaned it all out." Mother's eyes sparkled. "Now we can finally leave this wretched town. Imagine Lagos, Dubai, even London. No more begging. No more pretending." The room tilted around me. My head spun. They had drained nearly $1 million, the entirety of grandfather's legacy. My hands trembled with rage. For the first time in my life, I felt disgust burn hotter than fear. I stumbled back to my room and locked the door. My mind screamed at me to act, but how? I had no proof, no power, no allies. Then, just as I sat on the edge of my bed, something happened. The power went out. The storm howled outside, plunging the house into darkness. From the corridor, I heard the front gate slam shut, even though no one had touched it. The air turned icy. My skin prickled as though unseen eyes were fixed on me. And then, without warning, boom! The front door burst open with such force it echoed through the entire compound. My parents screamed from the study. Papers scattered. The sound of heavy footsteps followed, not hurried, but deliberate, like someone, or something, had just entered. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The storm raged louder, but what unsettled me wasn't outside. It was the oppressive presence that had entered our home. "Who is there?" my father shouted, his voice trembling. Silence. Only the creak of the door swaying in the wind. Mother clutched him. "Kwame, lock it back! Lock it!" But he didn't move. He was staring into the darkness beyond the threshold, as if he saw something the rest of us couldn't. His lips parted, whispering a name I barely caught. "Papa?" I crept out of my room, heart hammering, and saw what had paralyzed him. There, in the doorway, was a figure. A tall, frail silhouette that looked eerily familiar. Clothes drenched from the rain. Feet bare. And though the lightning only flickered for seconds, I saw it clearly, grandfather's face. But he was supposed to be in the ICU. Unmoving. Attached to machines. Mother shrieked, stumbling backward. "It's impossible. He's in the hospital." The figure said nothing, only stepped forward, water dripping onto the tiled floor. The scent of soil and wet earth filled the air. My father collapsed into a chair, pale as a ghost. I wanted to scream, to run, to question, but my body betrayed me. I stood rooted to the floor, staring at the impossible sight of the man who raised me. "Papa," my father croaked, his voice breaking. We only took the money because we thought you would never come back." The figure raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the piles of stolen cash. Lightning flashed again. His eyes, sunken and sorrowful, locked onto mine. And in that instant, I understood, whether this was spirit or flesh, it wasn't here for me. It was here for them. The storm intensified, rattling windows, howling like tortured souls. My mother clutched my father's arm, sobbing uncontrollably. He tried to speak, to explain, but his words dissolved into stammers. The figure took another step forward. The floorboards groaned under invisible weight. I whispered through my dry throat, "Grandfather?" The figure turned to me. And unlike the cold, judgmental gaze it cast on my parents, it softened for a moment, sad, almost forgiving. Then it shifted its gaze back to the money, back to the greed that had poisoned his children. The beeping sound of ICU machines echoed faintly in my ears, though we were nowhere near the hospital. A sound carried by something beyond the physical world. My mother collapsed onto her knees, wailing, "Forgive us. We didn't mean to dishonor you. We were scared. We only wanted a better life." But the figure did not speak. Another boom of thunder shook the house, and in its vibration, the piles of money scattered, bundles flying across the floor as though pushed by unseen hands. My parents screamed. I pressed myself against the wall, trembling. My mind screamed one question. If my grandfather was here, then who, or what, was lying in that ICU bed? The storm raged outside, but nothing compared to the chaos swirling inside our home. My parents were crouched on the floor, clutching each other, their faces twisted in terror. The figure, grandfather, or whatever it was, stood still, rainwater pooling beneath its feet. I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears. My legs were weak, yet my eyes refused to look away. There was something undeniable in that face, something too familiar to dismiss. But how could it be real? How could a man tethered to machines in a hospital bed walk through a door miles away? My father's voice cracked as he spoke, his tone more desperate than I had ever heard. "Papa, please. We didn't mean it this way. You don't understand, the money was only to protect us. We were afraid the family would fight over it once you," his words faltered. He couldn't bring himself to say die. Grandfather's eyes glistened like whetstones. His arm trembled as he pointed again, this time toward the door. My mother gasped, shaking her head violently. No, 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 we can't go out there. The storm will kill us. The lights flickered on and off, and in that brief strobe of electricity, I saw something that chilled me to the bone, the faint outline of tubes and wires still clinging to his skin, like shadows of the ICU bed. It was as if part of him hadn't left that hospital room at all. He took one more step. My parents scrambled backward, but the piles of cash seemed to hold them prisoner. Every time they tried to move away, another bundle slid across the floor, blocking their path. It was as though the money itself was a chain, binding them to their guilt. Papa, forgive us, my mother sobbed, collapsing into a heap. We only wanted to live better, to give your name honor. The figure finally spoke. The voice was low, raspy, like air scraping through dry leaves. Honor cannot be bought. The words sliced through the storm's roar. My father's face turned ghostly pale. He clutched his chest, gasping for breath, as though the weight of those words was crushing him. I couldn't take it anymore. My legs finally moved, carrying me between them and the figure. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. Baba, please. If this is really you, don't destroy them. They are weak, yes, but they are still your children. For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Then the figure's gaze shifted back to me, softer again, almost pained. His lips trembled, as though torn between justice and mercy. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut with a violent thud, rattling the entire house. My parents screamed. The figure turned, its outline flickering in the dim light, and then, like mist dissolving into rain, it was gone. The room fell quiet. Only the storm outside remained, though even that seemed to retreat into the distance. My parents were left shivering, surrounded by scattered bundles of stolen wealth. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, until my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out with trembling hands. It was the hospital calling. I answered. A nurse's voice came through, strained and urgent. Hello? Are you the grandson of Mr. Ajay? You need to come quickly. Something strange just happened. His heartbeat spiked out of nowhere, then dropped. We think he's passing. My throat tightened. My knees nearly gave way. At that same moment, my parents looked up at me with hollow eyes. They knew. The storm outside calmed abruptly, as though the world itself was holding its breath. And deep inside, I realized the unthinkable. While my parents drained his fortune, grandfather had spent his final strength walking through that door to confront them. The hospital corridors smelled of disinfectant and despair. I rushed in, my parents trailing behind me like shadows, their faces gray from sleepless terror. Nurses moved briskly, their eyes avoiding mine. When we reached the ICU, I froze. There he was, grandfather, lying exactly where he had been all along. Tubes ran across his fragile body, machines beeping with a rhythm too slow to comfort. His face was pale, still, untouched by rain or storm. But something was different. His eyes were open. Barely. I stepped closer, my chest tightening. He turned his head, ever so slightly, and his gaze met mine. His lips moved, dry and cracked, struggling to form words. I leaned in, desperate to catch them. Do not let greed bury you. Then, as if those words drained the last of his strength, the monitors wailed, and the line flattened into silence. My mother collapsed onto a chair, covering her face. My father bowed his head, trembling. For a moment, none of us spoke. The air was heavy, as though the weight of his words had pinned us to the ground. The funeral was unlike any other. People filled the courtyard, neighbors, relatives, and strangers whose lives he had touched. They praised him for his generosity, his discipline, his heart. But I couldn't stop thinking about that night, the storm, the door, the figure dripping rainwater onto our tiles. My parents avoided people's eyes, their voices low whenever condolences were offered. They had spent weeks trying to hide their crime, but guilt clung to them like a stench no soap could wash away. The stolen money, though untouched since that night, remained locked in the study. Neither dared to spend it. One evening, I found my father sitting in that very room, staring at the bundles scattered across the table. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot. "It feels cursed," he whispered, his voice hollow. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him standing there, watching." I wanted to tell him he was right, that the money was poisoned, but instead I asked, "Then why don't you return it?" His lips quivered, but he said nothing. Weeks passed. The family expected me, as the eldest grandchild, to manage grandfather's affairs. I was young, yes, but his will named me as one of the executors. The truth was, he trusted me more than his own children. When I opened his journals, hidden in a chest beneath his bed, I found detailed notes about the sacrifices he had made for us. How he had gone hungry so my parents could go to university. How he had refused bribes so his children could carry his name with pride. Each page was a testament of love and endurance. And yet, the very people he sacrificed for had robbed him at his weakest moment. I stood in that study one night, staring at the fortune my parents had stolen. The storm's memory still haunted me. I could almost hear the door slamming, feel his eyes piercing through me. So I made a choice. The next morning, I went to the bank. One by one, I deposited the cash back into grandfather's account, using his estate's name. I informed the family elders of what had happened, sparing no detail. My parents begged me not to. They knelt, they wept, they cursed. But it was too late. Truth had a way of burning through lies. When the elders confronted them, the shame was unbearable. My father could not lift his head. My mother refused to eat for days. The entire town whispered of their betrayal, and though they still lived under the same roof, they became ghosts of themselves, hollow, broken, consumed by their own greed. As for me, I found peace in knowing I had honored grandfather's legacy. I poured myself into continuing his work, funding the school, supporting the clinic, and protecting his name. But some nights, when the wind howls and the rain lashes against the roof, I still remember that night. The door flying open. The figure dripping with rain. His voice echoing like thunder. Honor cannot be bought. Wealth is not just money, it is legacy, reputation, and the lives touched along the way. My parents thought riches would shield them, but they forgot that greed does not sleep. It haunts. It destroys. I often wonder if the figure that entered our house that night was truly grandfather's spirit or simply the weight of our own guilt made flesh. But one truth remains, when money blinds the heart, even the living can become haunted. And so, whenever I see a stack of bills, I hear his voice again, reminding me that greed is the door we must never open, for once it blows wide, it may never close.